Welcome to the Neurodiverse Lens, a CDL podcast featuring Carolyn and Jordan.
Welcome to the Neurodiverse Lens, a Center for Diverse Learners podcast. I'm Carolyn Rankin-Booten, and I'm here with Jordan, who is our social engagement and communications manager, and I am the executive director at CDL. Today, we have a topic that I don't know what word to put with it. I wouldn't say I'm excited to talk about. I think that's so important to talk about. We're going to talk about neurodiversity and mental health. Before we get going, I want to say that nothing that comes out of my mouth should substitute advice from a doctor. Speak to your healthcare team. I am not a psychologist. I'm not a psychotherapist. I am a neurodiverse person myself who has a lot of experience with this, but that is just my experience. And it's really important when we're talking about healthcare issues to understand that we're sharing our experience, we're sharing what we've seen, but we're not sharing medical advice. And it's always important to talk to your doctor because everyone is different. If there's one thing we're trying to get across in this podcast, even though there is often a lot of similarities amongst neurodiverse individuals, we're all different. You know the saying, if you've met one person with autism, you've met one person with autism. And so we want to make sure that when you're listening to this, that you get validation from some of the things that we talk about, or maybe it's not your experience, but that you're understanding that your own mental health journey is your own, and that the message we do hope you hear is that you deserve to have good mental health. And being neurodiverse does not mean you have to have poor mental health, but that it is your own individual journey. And so today, listen, gain something from our perspective, but do seek your own medical advice if necessary. And please do not substitute what I say against any medical advice you've already received.
Yeah, today we're going to be kind of diving into what the relationship between neurodiversity and mental health might look like for some folks. I kind of wanted to talk about the, problematic term of superpower and neurodiversity, and, how talking about self-care strategies potentially that you may have practiced or you've seen other people practice, how it's been beneficial for them or for yourself, and I can speak to that a lot as well. There's a lot of self-care tips that I like to practice just in my day-to-day life. So what might you kind of describe the relationship between neurodiversity and potentially anxiety or depression? What might that look like? Or you may have seen just kind of in our line of work dealing with a lot of different folks who are neurodiverse.
That's a big question without one specific answer. So there's a couple of things at play here. First of all, being a neurodiverse person, it's difficult to navigate in a neurotypical world. It can often feel like the world is not meant for you. That in itself can cause mental health concerns. If you are a child who is going into school every day and struggling to socialize, well, that may lead to anxiety and depression. What we do know, what research tells us, is that neurodiversity often comes with comorbid mental health concerns, anxiety, depression. We know that people with autism are 70% of them will have another mental health concern, another mental health diagnosis. We know in ADHD that number's around 60%. And the research is really ongoing and new. Neurodiversity isn't a newish term, and obviously it's different from each diagnosis. So it's kind of a two-pronged answer. We know that there are comorbid mental health concerns with neurodiversity, and we also know that neurodiversity can lead to anxiety and depression. When I think back to my childhood and I think back to all the things that I was being faced, I was bullied terribly in school, and I remember as a kid being what I now recognize as really depressed and really anxious. I can't tell you what it felt like knowing I had to get on the bus every day and go to a school where no one liked me. And knowing that I don't know what I'm going to face that day. I don't know what taunts I'm going to hear. So that definitely led to my anxiety. I also want to talk about the other piece, which is adults who get diagnosed later into adulthood in their 30s and 40s who may have been incorrectly diagnosed with other mental health concerns. We know that women with ADHD and autism are often diagnosed with bipolar, BPD, other conditions that may or may not be accurate. They may be comorbid, or they may have never been real, and it's really their autism symptoms that are incorrectly being displayed as mental health concerns. And this is why I had such a long disclaimer at the beginning. It's obviously a complicated issue with so much individuality. And I don't want to invalidate any autistic woman who sees themselves as both bipolar and autistic. And I also want to validate the experience of what I have seen personally as a lot of autistic women who have been diagnosed with everything, only to later find out, oh no, it was autism that was making me seem emotionally dysregulated, but really it was things in my life that I was responding to and my not understanding that I was diagnosed or that I should be diagnosed as autistic that was causing it.
Yeah, no, and I really kind of, I guess, piggyback off that. How would the effort to fit into a neurotypical world impact mental health as well? Because it's that constant cycle of, I guess, trying to fit in versus unmasking, I guess.
Yeah, I just want to share my experience on this one. Mm-hmm. So I was sharing just before we came here. So last week, giving a plug for CDL, we won a Business Excellence Award given to the Burlington Chamber of Commerce. And I was talking about how I still felt like the bullied child going there. I still felt like I didn't look good enough. I still had these voices in my head being like, you don't deserve to win, you're not going to win, all of these things happening. And I also had a lot of anxiety about going to the event. I'm good at it when I get there. I know the elevator pitch of our organizations. I know how to give a speech, but I often have a lot of anxiety leading up to going. And as an autistic person in a neurotypical world, I also have, and this probably is actually the harder part, when I leave, I'm running through everything I said or did, and I'm putting it through the lens of how I feel other people must have saw it, and I can really sometimes beat myself up because I'm like, oh, did they understand when I said that I meant this and I was being sincere? Did they understand that I didn't mean to give them a hug when they went to do a handshake, which actually happened twice at that event? And that can be the piece, because I know how I perceive the event, but I'm always trying to understand, how did other people see what I did? Did they understand where I was coming from and that piece? Because the best way I can describe it for me is that socializing, networking, that piece is like speaking a language I'm fluent in but is not my native tongue. So I know the right things to do and say. I know how to interact, but it can sometimes feel unnatural. It can feel like I'm masking. And then you can have the shame of, oh, I was masking and I wasn't myself. All of these things go into it. It's a whole nother level of mental load that, as an autistic person, I face when I socialize, that I'm dealing with when I socialize. And the interesting thing is, I personally don't know if neurotypical people do that, because I only have my experience of an event being so heavy every time. And I know other people beat themselves up about it, but that's a piece of it. We joke that I will never, ever, ever listen or watch this podcast. It's not going to happen. I'm not going to do it. I don't like the way I look on camera. those of you who faithfully watch know that I talk with my hands a lot. My hands are always doing some weird motions. I'm never going to be able to stop doing it. It'll either be my hands like will be so tight in my lap that they will actually be sore because I'm gritting them so much, or they'll just do their own thing. And it's that own internalized ableism. Like, this is the tough part of being a neurodiverse person, is I have to put this extra work of understanding that sometimes that can look weird to other people, then being okay with it because I have to disable that voice inside my head. It's okay that I talk with my hands. It doesn't hurt anybody except when I accidentally knock over drinks as I hit the microphone as I do it. Or, you know what I mean? It's not hurting anybody. And like letting it go and saying that it's okay that I need to express words with my hands as I talk. So when we're talking about mental health, that's exhausting. It's exhausting. And when I'm thinking negatively about myself, it's not helping my mental health. And so that can play into it.
So after an event like the Business Awards, or maybe an afternoon spent recording this podcast, are there any specific self-care strategies that you might practice?
Absolutely. So the first thing is accepting that I will need rest, accepting that I will need downtime. That is sometimes the hardest piece, but is the most important piece. It's also knowing that it's not always the same thing. So sometimes it can kind of amp me up and my brain can kind of be spinning, and then I need to be physical. So I'll take the dog for a walk. I will I like to lift weights, not heavy weights, not because I don't think women should lift heavy weights, but because I am very weak. But I need to exercise. Other times it's like, okay, I need to like almost shut down. And then I love to do a true crime podcast and then like play like a mobile game on my phone that's like really repetitive and just kind of let my brain rest. Getting diagnosed, the number one thing that changed my life was the acceptance that I needed rest without having to beat myself up. That has been life-changing for me. Because before, I'd go to a social event and I'd be like, it's 6 p.m, why are you so tired? Like, keep going. Like, what's wrong with you? And now I'm like, no, I just know. Yeah. And being able to articulate that to other people. As you know, I was supposed to go to an event after this, and we worked around the schedule and shifted it in our team so I didn't have to, because I will need to rest. We're going to film 3 podcasts in a row today. And so I'll need time off, and accepting that piece and accepting that it's not always the same thing. That was a rookie mistake I made when I was first diagnosed. I found some things that worked, and I was like, but this isn't working. Why is it? Because sometimes I need to go for a walk. And sometimes it's actually saying to my poor husband, I need to talk this out. This is in my head and it feels bad in my head. I need to talk it out and get it out. And luckily I have a partner who really has understood the difference between like, do you want me to solve this, or do you just want me to listen and tell you that you are 100% right and everyone else is wrong? Which is what he'll do. And then he'll later like come to me and be like, let's be honest. Yeah. But in the moment, I might need to get it out and talk. It's about, without shame, finding what works for you and knowing that piece. And that can really be tricky, especially for people with ADHD as well, to have the time management to know that you need that downtime and be able to put it in your calendar. But put it in your calendar. You deserve that. I know that if it was one of your friends who said, hey, after a social event, I need to relax, you would say to your friend, go relax. Yeah. Well, do you say the same thing to yourself, or are you shaming yourself for needing that thing? So treat yourself like you would a friend.
Yeah, I experience that a lot with my partner when he works his 12-hour shifts in a row and he has 2 days off at the end. I know that first day is just going to be, a sit at home, hang out, relax. He paints his little miniature things in his room and I don't talk to him. And that's fine, because I know the next day he's going to do whatever I say. And then he, the cycle continues of we have our plans, but he always knows that he has that one rest day where he can sit at home and do nothing. And, I'm not going to force him to go to my parents' house for dinner or go to the mall or anything like that. And he has that day to kind of reset, because His job is super demanding. He also has ADHD. So obviously to kind of fit into that schedule, he needs that day to kind of rest, relax, and recharge. And anything I can do to help support that, I just try to make it easier for him because I know our work schedules are very different.
That's amazing. And I want to take a moment to think about children who probably don't have the language or knowledge or self-understanding to know what they need. And that can be really tough as parents. Advice, I always give to neurodiverse parents is you need to book in the rest time for your kids. Some neurodiverse kids do like a lot of activities. You might want to schedule them, but you want to make sure you're balancing that with rest time. As I talked about in the parenting episode, this might be talking with your child's teacher about we can't do homework during the week. It needs to be caught up on the weekend because my child comes home and they're exhausted. One of the pieces of being an adult is being able to take that rest time myself. And I am lucky that my parents just naturally understood that I needed more rest and more quiet time. And I'm so thankful that they did. Because I can't imagine being an 8-year-old and my brain needing rest. And then someone telling me, no, you now need to go do this thing, and how difficult that would be for that child. And sometimes it might be that weekend catch up, or it might be having one weeknight where it's quiet night at home and they're allowed to do whatever they want to really get that brain rest. That time might also need to be not screen time.
Right.
Because they may need brain rest, but that I want to empower parents to make the best decision for their child, even if there is societal pressure to not give that child the rest that they deserve. There's no 8-year-old whose life is going to be totally off course if they don't practice their spelling on Thursday night. Nobody knows what I got on my grade 4 spelling test. It is not an indicator of future success. So if your child needs rest, use your best judgment because you want to protect their mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to kind of bring the conversation to our favorite word, and I say that sarcastically. I should preface that. The word superpower, and why framing neurodiversity as that might, fall short in capturing the full experience of being neurodiverse, and why it is so important to also acknowledge the difficulties in, being a neurodiverse individual.
Yeah, this is a tough one because everyone should be able to describe themselves in the way that they want to. And if a neurodiverse individual wants to describe themselves as having a superpower, or they want to wear a shirt that says autism is my superpower, 100%. Yes. But what I often see, and that's completely okay, and I don't have a problem with that. But what I often see is that rhetoric is often coming from our allies and not people who are neurodiverse themselves. And so if a person is saying it's their superpower, I support that. I have no qualms with that.
Yes.
Why I would never say that to someone else and why I would not say that to myself is neurodiversity is really tough. Do I think it makes me a great problem solver? Do I think it allows me to see entire situations as all together? I see how all the pieces fit together. When at work I'm dealing with a problem, I can see how everything impacts everything, how one decision leads to everything. I have a ton of energy. I know we just talked about rest, but I can go. Today will be a 14-hour day for me, and I guarantee at the end I'll be like, oh, that was easy. I mean, I am going to watch a true crime podcast and play my game when I get home, but
absolutely,
it gives me lots of energy. I think it makes me a unique thinker. I'm often seeing things different than other people. Those are great. Those are wonderful assets that I wouldn't want anyone to take away from me. But sometimes I'm really lonely. And sometimes I feel really lonely in a room full of people. I do want to give a shout out to the Burlington Chamber, though, not just because they gave us an award, But that night, even if I didn't win, and I didn't find out I was winning until like almost the very end of the night, the Burlington Chamber made sure everyone was celebrated that night, and all of the chamber members were celebrating each other. It was such an uplifting night. It, honestly, I'm gonna get choked up. It was one of those nights in my life where I was like, I didn't feel alone. But I'm gonna be honest, a lot of times I do feel really, really alone, even when I'm surrounded with people. Sometimes I'll be at an event and I'll do a speech and I'll come down and someone will say something really ableist to me. You know, I'll share that I'm autistic and someone will go, "Oh, you didn't look special." And I'll be like, and I'm instantly feeling so, so, so alone in that moment. And I have this like, and I also struggle, like a lot of autistic people, with processing big, heavy emotions quickly. I need time to process information sometimes. And that can be really tough because we live in a fast-paced world. I'm lucky that I'm in a position of control at my work where I can be like, I want to think about this for a day, and I'm the boss and I can say, I want to think about this for a day, and that's how that is. But it can also be really challenging. I don't do well when things can't go the way I want them to do. Like, I have an envisionment of my day. I don't even think envisionment is a word, but I envision my day. And sometimes a wrench will be thrown in it, and internally I can be dying inside. And because I'm a leader, I have to just mask up and share it. And so when people say to me that autism is my superpower, I bristle because it really isn't embracing that neurodiverse people need support and that being in a neurotypical world is really, really tough. And even though I am the leader at CDL, alongside my board, I get to set a lot of policies. I have a lot of control over my day. It's still difficult. And I worry about children who are being told that they have a superpower, and that's not what they're experiencing. What they're experiencing is loneliness at school, not getting the grades that they want, feeling like they're not reaching their potential, not understanding why they can't do something. You know, dyslexia can be really heartbreaking. And where a child wants to read, does not understand why everyone around them can read and they can't. And they're just so frustrated, so frustrated. And then to have someone be like, but it's a superpower. Being neurodiverse is a superpower. Oh, there's so many good things about being dyslexic. And they are. There's a lot of positives about being dyslexic. If you have a complex problem in your life, find someone who has dyslexia and they're probably going to see the position from a different way. They're often very visual thinkers and often very creative. And those are not every dyslexic person, obviously, but those are things that we often see with dyslexia. But to invalidate someone's experience by being like, this is great when it's not, is just, can be heartbreaking because it can add that extra level of shame that I feel neurodiverse individuals already have.
Yeah, and I wanted to also talk about kind of that support piece that you had mentioned. And that support might be a therapist, it might be a counselor, it might be just your family doctor. Do you have any advice or tips for someone who might be looking for a medical professional in that field?
Absolutely. So always start with your family doctor. We do know that there are long waiting lists to OHIP covered professionals, but talk about your experience and your need for support. The other piece is if finances are an issue, make sure that you look for people who do sliding scale. The other piece is knowing yourself. So as a neurodiverse person, do you want someone who understands it from a personal experience, or do you want a practitioner who you're explaining it to, helping them understand it from your perspective? Those are differences. If you have, well, you know me, I can get off on a tangent. I don't want my therapist who can get off on a tangent. I want a therapist who knows how to bring me back.
Right.
the biggest piece of advice I have is being open about what you need and trusting whether or not that practitioner is the right person. And maybe when you put in your request, letting them know that if they're not the right person, please refer me to someone who you think is. Therapists often know other therapists and they will know other people's strengths. So if you put in your request, this is what I'm looking for, let me know. Also, it is okay to break up with your therapist. If your therapist doesn't understand your brand of neurodiversity, because we always talk about the diversity within neurodiversity, like two autistic people are not the same thing, just as I talked about at the beginning of it. One of the things I've faced is stereotypes of neurodiversity from my therapist, and then I had to leave and find another therapist who could see me for me, and sometimes that's a really difficult process. I'm going to be honest that it's a difficult process currently in Ontario, and that especially for adults, there's not always a lot of people who know the right piece. For families that are living in Hamilton and Halton, if you're looking for it, with your children, book a resource call with us and we can get into it a little bit more specifically. But the main thing is either know what you want, but be open to maybe that's not the right thing. Communicate what you need and be open to the person saying, maybe I'm not the right person and referring you elsewhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted to also kind of talk about what a neurodiverse individual could do to maybe better prepare for an appointment. How could they advocate for themselves better? Maybe if it's appropriate to bring someone with you or ask for an accommodation.
Yeah, so if we're talking about working with your family doctor, working with in the system of OHIP, absolutely bring someone with you. You want to write down ahead of time what you want to talk about and what your concerns are. You want to be really clear about those concerns. Sometimes we can be told that that's not a really big issue, and then you kind of go, oh, I guess it's not. You're going to have to be firm, and that's why you want to bring someone with you. The other thing is there's still a lot of bias and stigma within the medical system of neurodiversity. So you want to bring someone who can push forward and that possibly the doctor will listen to. One of the other things you want to be careful though when you bring someone is make sure the doctor is still talking to you and that they don't talk to the person that you're with. Mm-hmm. Redirect the doctor. I want to acknowledge that anytime within our current healthcare system that we are dealing with doctors, there is a bit of a power disimbalance. We need the support, and this is who we have. And there's always that fear of if it doesn't work with this doctor, how long am I going to be on a referral list? How long am I going to wait to get a second opinion? Am I even going to get a second opinion? Am I going to get shut down? Another thing that you can do is at the end of the visit, ask your doctor what they wrote in your chart. What did you write in my chart, please? Say, I don't need a copy of it, but what did you write? And if they deny you service of any kind, ask that that is added to the note and their reason why that was denied. So if they're not going to send you for therapy, okay, can you please put in the note that I requested therapy and that you denied my request at this time? You have a right to clarify what is in your chart. That's your medical record. And you want to take ownership of that because they might write things that are completely inaccurate. And you have a right to clarify that point so that you are getting the help you need. With a therapist, you may not necessarily need an advocate because the therapist is there for you. Right. And not to say that primary care doctors are not. I just want to acknowledge that we are in a shortage of doctors, and often your 15-minute appointment feels like 10 minutes. And something as complicated as mental health and neurodiversity is really hard to dive into in 10 minutes, and that's not necessarily the primary care doctor's fault. I don't want to just throw doctors under the bus. But therapists, you've got, usually in that first meeting, you've got an hour and a half to discuss yourself. But if you want to bring an advocate, absolutely you can. Don't be afraid or that they'll be upset. You can also, ahead of a meeting, ask for what you need, or in the meeting, you can ask for accommodations. Doctors are also required to provide accommodations to their patients. So if there's something you need, ask for it. And I don't want to say that as if it's so easy as ask and you get. I want to say, I know it's hard to have someone come to your appointment with you because you might be discussing things that are really private to yourself that you might not want people to know. I just know that having an advocate does help, but I want to really honor that that can be tough within itself.
I think the accommodation part, it could even be something just as simple as using an online booking system versus calling in. I know the direction that everything is kind of going nowadays is a lot of things are virtual online booking, and sometimes that might not even work for an individual. You might have to call and book the appointment over the phone and get that verbal communication before maybe getting an email or anything like that. I think that's super important, and it's something that I've experienced as well. Just like the taking away that face-to-face communication with even just like the receptionist. That's something that I struggle with, especially with at the doctor. I really wanted to kind of go back to our self-care discussion and talk about, different strategies on how, that might work for individuals, but even their parents and their children, and what kind of that self-care might look like for a parent versus a child that is neurodiverse.
One thing I see is that parents of neurodiverse children are so often putting their kids first. So often. We work with so many different families at CDL, and it's always heartwarming how much their parents care about their children. The one thing I want to say is that you help your child when you help yourself. And I understand me saying this on a podcast is not going to make that super doable right away. But I think acknowledging that it isn't selfish to do the self-care is important. The other piece is, we know often that neurodiverse children come from neurodiverse parents, not always, but sometimes. And you may both benefit from co-regulation. What about co-self-care? I'm a big fan of a parent using self-care as also a bonding moment and to help the child do self-care. My mom, if I was having a hard time, we would go for walks together. And there were some times where maybe she needed me to not just constantly talk at her, which is something I struggle with, balancing conversations. And so at sometimes she would say, this is going to date me a little bit, she would put her Walkman on and I would put my own Walkman on, and we'd go for a walk together. And we're together, and we're co-regulating, and we're doing all the right things. And shout out to my parents who didn't even know that they had a neurodiverse child and often did a lot of things that were super helpful for me. So going for a walk with your child is really helpful. I love family reading time, and maybe that's the teacher in me, but that's where everyone's reading their own books. If your child's struggling to read, it can be a visual book, it can be a visual comic book that they're reading on their own, and you have your own book. In the winter, you add a hot chocolate with that. It's perfect. In the summer, add a lemonade, and you're creating that moment. You're getting to relax, but you're also helping your neurodiverse child in that moment. Because that's often the struggle, right? Is as a parent of a neurodiverse child, you're often having to deal with their needs and putting yours at the side. And so if you can find opportunities to do that together, that's really helpful. It's why we in the summers do our friendship club and parent support at the same time. The kids can play upstairs and the parents can have peer support in the basement. A big piece of that self-care, though, also I think is finding another parent of a neurodiverse child. Neurotypical parents might have a hard time understanding your experience, even if they want to and are good-hearted. it can be really tough, and you can really love your child, and it might be your neurotypical friend who's saying, oh no, but your kid has a superpower, and it's like not helpful.
Yeah.
And so meeting another neurodiverse parent is really important. And I know as an organization, it's our next biggest push is making sure we're creating more and more opportunities for parents to connect with one another, because that's such an important piece. So if you can co-regulate together, that is amazing. I don't know if everyone's seen the clip from Survivor. So there was a woman who had autism who was participating on the show, and she actually won a challenge. But everyone was shouting, and it was really intense moment, and she got dysregulated. And a man from the other team said, "Can I come over and give you a hug?" He came over and he regulated his breathing, and it helped her regulate her breathing, and she was able to calm right down. That co-regulation is really important, and a lot of neurodiverse children need it. And this is why sometimes parent mental health with neurodiversity can be so hard, because your child's having such a difficult moment and you're trying to address it. I'm giving you permission to maybe not address it in that moment, to let the quiet time happen, to shake off that another parent is giving you a tisk tisk, because in the supermarket, instead of chastising your child for being dysregulated, maybe you're hugging your child and you're both breathing and having a moment of acceptance. Because there will always be someone, no matter how perfect you are as a parent, complaining about how you parent and thinking that they can do it better. So shake that off and do the co-regulation when you need to. And if in that car ride home, because it was a really difficult supermarket thing, you need to play your own song in the car, let them listen to their own song with their own headphones. You can take care of yourself. And if anyone gives you grief, just say, Carolyn from CDL told me I could, and and then you can.
Yeah, exactly. So to kind of wrap it up, what is one piece of advice that you would give, whether it be a neurodiverse individual or a parent, regarding neurodiversity and mental health?
It may be harder to have solid, good mental health if you're neurodiverse or have a neurodiverse child. It may take more time, energy, and care. It may take more intentionality, but you deserve it. And it is the job of the allies around you to make sure that you have that opportunity to do what you need. It can be difficult to articulate what you need. One of the things that I have found helpful is podcasts like this and others that are talking about this and showing it to someone and saying, see, this is what I need, because sometimes it's hard. Mm-hmm. Be an advocate for yourself, and be an advocate with your own self. So when that voice inside says, you're not doing enough, you don't need rest, keep going, oh my goodness, you're going to sit in bed and doom scroll, how dare you? Give yourself the permission to do what you need to do that's best for you. And don't shame yourself. Because if you have a neurodiverse child, or if you're neurodiverse yourself, you may need more rest than neurotypical people. Or you may be the type of person where rest looks really different. I know some people with ADHD where rest looks like running 15K. That's how they rest their brain. That's how they rest. And so being true to you and giving yourself the permission to have good mental health, to make the time and energy to do so.
Yeah, 1,000%. I mean, you won't catch me running 15 kilometers anywhere. I'm definitely more of a doom scroller, but it is rewarding in a weird part of my brain. But is there anything that you wanted to maybe plug or talk about that might be going on at CDL before we finish off the episode?
I just want to talk about our resource calls. Thanks to the Halton region, we can support families in Halton. If you've listened to this and you said that's great, but I need to know where to start, I would like a list of resources. You can go on our website, diverselearners.ca, and all over the website are buttons to book these parent support things. You can book a visit. If you happen to live outside the Halton region, send us an email and we'll do what we can. We'll refer you to another local agency that can support, or we can send you our list of resources that way. It's hard for parents. And as CDL, we want to support our parents as much as we want to support our students. And we want you to know that we hear you and that we know that things are tough. So our plug is, you might want to access our services, but it's creating a big mental load to do it. That's why we make registration really easy. You can fill out our registration form online, or you can just give us a call and we'll walk you through the process. We're here to support children and parents. We know that, so book a resource call if we can support you in any way, or send us an email.
Yes, we have many different ways that you are able to communicate with us. You can give us a call, you can book an appointment, you can email us. If in person works best, you can contact us through any of those avenues, and we can set up a time for you to come in person and sit down and kind of discuss with the team and see how we can best support you and your family. But I just want to say thank you, Carolyn, for another fantastic conversation. And I think as hard as these conversations about mental health might be, I think they're important for our listeners. So.
Thanks, Jordan. Thanks for always creating a safe space and helping me open up about these topics.
Thank you for listening to the Neurodiverse Lens, a CDL podcast. For more information, visit diverselearners.ca.